Morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for the weekly call for community solutions hosted by the Forbes Funds and GPMP. For those of you who haven't joined us before, our team has hosted these community calls weekly since March of 2020 to provide nonprofits with critical resources and updates, a shared space to discuss challenges, a snapshot of relevant policies, and timely insight from subject matter experts. Since that time, the Forbes Funds and GPMP have hosted over 5,600 meetings with the participation of over 48,280 dedicated community members to discuss emergent needs and opportunities in the social impact sector. We do all of this utilizing a dual framework that draws on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the social determinants of health to align cross-sector and guide the outcomes of our work. Additionally, the 8 returns model guides how we measure the success or returns on various forms of our investment. For today's call, we encourage you to go ahead and use the chat function to share your name and organization with the group, as well as any comments or questions you might have during today's call. We also strongly encourage you to join us on screen to maximize engagement. We'll reserve time for a Q&A after our speaker presentation, followed by Forbes Funds GPMP ecosystem updates and a public policy recap. And as a friendly reminder, please do complete the poll at the end of the call. This will help us to keep our content and resources relevant to you all. So today we have joining us Mark Lancia from 412 Ability Tech. Mark is a board member with this organization. It's a group of Western PA innovators, service providers, and advocates focused on enhancing the lives of disabled individuals through technology and innovation. Mark serves as a fractional marketing leader for SMBs and nonprofits, providing strategic direction, planning, and guiding implementation. As a board member of 412 Ability Tech, he is helping shape the young organization's growth strategy and program expansion. We are so excited to hear from Mark today. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over again. If you have any questions at all during the presentation, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and we will save time during the Q&A. All right, Mark, thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Hello, everybody. And also joined by some fellow board members here. I see Alex Gett and Gal Inbar out there, and may have a few others from 412 Ability Tech joining us. So thanks, everybody, for your time. As Christine mentioned, 412 Ability Tech is a Pittsburgh-based community of innovators, service providers, and advocates, all here to support disabled individuals. And just for a little bit of context here, let's see. Just for some context, in Allegheny County, about 13 to 14% of the population has either some ambulatory difficulty or hearing and vision or cognitive challenges. And that represents, again, about 163,000 people in Allegheny County. If you look in southwestern Pennsylvania, obviously, if directionally the numbers are similar. So it's a large population in our area with some type of disability or challenge. And the good news is that there are many innovators, service providers, and advocates in our area that support that population in one form or fashion. We have innovators in our world-class research universities, and a lot of the innovation in startups that come out of those universities supporting disabled individuals. Service providers from nonprofits all the way up to our large health systems are here providing support. And we have many advocates in the philanthropic community and elsewhere, advocacy, government relations, and so on, here to help support and champion the disabled population. And these logos are, by the way, are just a sampling of the many organizations here in our area supporting that population and supporting our community. But despite that, there are some challenges or some missed opportunities, let's just say. Many of those organizations have services and have the resources to support the disabled individuals that they're built for. But those individuals may not be aware that those organizations are there to support them, or what kind of offerings or support are available to them. And so access can be a challenge, or maybe really better put, a missed opportunity. We've also learned through our relations and engagement with these organizations that they often miss the opportunity to connect with each other and to collaborate in ways that might open up doors for them or open up new possibilities for innovation that might help them improve the service or offerings that they provide. And so that's really where 412 Ability Tech steps in. And that's why we were created, which was really to connect those dots, to help those innovators, service providers, and advocates collaborate, work together, learn about each other's organizations and what they have to offer so that they can in turn help each other. Now, our purpose is to ultimately to enhance the lives of disabled individuals by strengthening that ecosystem, and do that in the greater Pittsburgh area to build that community within our hometown. Now, how do we do that? We do that by creating opportunities for our members to connect, to share knowledge, to collaborate. We also then are here to raise awareness of their work and the disabilities they support. So that those folks that are out there that may not be aware of who they are and what they have to offer can learn about them and maybe connect and benefit from that. And so that's what we're built for, is to create opportunities for those members to connect and to raise awareness of their work within our community. And so to date, we formed in March of 2023, a little over 2 years ago. And to this point, we've had 6 in-person events hosted by some of those member organizations. We've had great attendance at those events, 40 participating organizations, over 200 attendees. And in those events, those are typically half-day events where we'll have a keynote speaker typically from the host organization that's hosting the event. They'll speak for maybe 20, 30 minutes about who they are, what they offer, and how others can maybe connect and what needs they might have from others to help improve their offerings. So the host and the keynote speaker kicks off the day. We typically have a tour of the facility of the host organization where attendees can learn a lot more about their day-to-day operations and the value that they offer. And then in the back half of that half-day session, we'll have 2 breakout sessions on a given topic that the group wants to speak about or discuss further. And those breakouts occur simultaneously, and it's a great opportunity to exchange, to share knowledge, to identify opportunities, and this happens a lot, to identify opportunities for our member organizations to collaborate and connect offline after the event. And so those have been very successful and very positively received. We've also had community outreach events where we've hosted maker events with students, high school students, as well as college students who would kind of tutor and mentor those high school students. And we would focus on, for example, 3D printing technologies or other technologies that rather than, learning how to use 3D printing to develop something that is a keychain or, something kind of benign, we teach them how to design something and how to produce something that can actually help somebody, an assistive technology type of tool or device that might help somebody in some fashion. And so those are really popular and well received among the students, and of course the people that can use those products that the students produce. We've also had a presence at assistive technology events, primarily here in Pittsburgh, robotics fairs. We just attended and participated in the International Seating Symposium, which drew thousands from around the world, really, here to Pittsburgh. And then of course, we've also had a little bit of local media outreach. One of our board members is Dr. Jeffrey Cohen with the Allegheny Health Network, and he's been a great advocate for us in local media, talking about what we do and the member organizations that we support. So that's been our growth and our progress to date. At our last event, we did a survey, and we wanted to understand how we can build on that momentum and how we can add to the offerings and services that we provide to our member organizations. And so as a result, we've developed a plan. We're at a bit of a crossroads, and would welcome any input and feedback from the group here given your experience, maybe you've been down this road before, and we'd love to hear maybe how you've tackled some of these challenges. But right now, we've had the strong in-person response. We've gotten input from them, and we've developed a programming plan. It's our intention to build on the in-person events with more in-person events in the coming year, but also then to take that engagement and that collaboration and that knowledge sharing online, so that they can collaborate more regularly throughout the year. So we're looking at online events and community building online through a forum. In fact, our first web event will be scheduled here in late May, with a theme around building resilience in challenging times. So we want those organizations to share stories about how they are being resilient in the face of some uncertainty, so that they can maybe help others learn and maybe borrow some ideas. We're also building a member directory, not just for those members to find each other, but ultimately for the disabled individuals who may not be aware of those offerings and those services to connect with the right organizations. So that's what we're looking to do here in the coming year programming wise. But in order to support that, we need to generate some revenue. So we're looking at building a membership fees package and sponsorship fee package for organizations to support and to enable some of this additional programming. We also have a commitment from our first donor to match grant funding, provided that we can get additional grant fundings from other organizations. And so we have a lot of things in place, a lot of momentum, but we're at a bit of a crossroads to have these things fall in place and to get the funding that we need to make this sustainable. And so, would love any input. We are finalizing our 501(c)(3) status. We are probably a week or a few weeks away from that as max. We're on the 2-yard line there, but and we also then need to implement that programming plan. With this funding that we can obtain, then we hire a part-time staffer to support the content and the social media posting and to administer the web type events online. So we're looking to hire a part-time staffer to support that. And again, we could benefit from your advice and any ideas you might have on grant applications, management, operations, and so on. So that's where we are. We're excited about how far we've come, but we're also excited about where we'd like to head. And we appreciate any advice or support you might have along the way. If you'd like to join us, you can join us at some upcoming events. As I mentioned, we have a May webinar scheduled probably for the back half of May. We will be locking that date in here this week. So stay tuned for that announcement. But we also are planning a summer in-person event, another half-day event. The webinar will be probably 60 minutes, but the in-person event will be another half-day event, probably sometime in early July is what we're looking to lock that in on. So follow us on LinkedIn. This QR code can take you to our LinkedIn profile, and that's where we typically post updates. But you can also go to 412abilitytech.org, the URL there at the bottom left, and learn more about us and sign up to become informed on our next events. My name is Mark Lancia, and I offer, as Christine mentioned, strategic marketing planning and support. And so I'm happy to help organizations here. If you're interested in kind of a free 2-hour work session in the month of May, I'm able to support 2 or 3 organizations in May in those 2 or 3-hour workshops to help you understand or kind of crystallize what you're looking to do to help your organizations grow. And then I can help guide you through and develop some strategies that might help you get there. So happy to do that. If you're interested, you can put that in the chat. I'm interested, and maybe put your email address in there, and then I can follow up with you offline. So appreciate all your time, and if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear it.
Mark. And I do see that we have a couple of your board members on, and I wasn't sure if they wanted to take a moment to come off and share a little bit more with us, Alex or Gal. I don't want to put you on the spot, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's Alex. I would maybe add also some small part that we also focusing and trying to bring more of the educational side to the assistive technology and disabilities. especially when we see a lot of universities like CMU, Pete, Duquesne, Chatham really involved and leading in Pittsburgh. But from speaking with most of them, they're almost not really involved in the disability or assistive technology innovation. So the last year we was also focusing on bringing some innovation into the STEAM programs and engineering programs, making more of these assistive technology projects, products, and learning about disabilities. So we're collaborating with Tom Tikkun Lawmaker nonprofit that creates those open source assistive technology products. And we have 3 fellows groups in Pete, Duquesne, and CMU that they creating those groups of students that working on disabilities and creating this project. So for the last year, we have schools, universities involved, learning about disabilities, creating new products, and we see how the involvement of those students in the disability field create this kind of innovational side. And then with those innovations, we also collaborating with the local organizations and see, for example, if some of the students developed some adaptive game, how it can be really used in those rehabilitation centers and hospitals. And we totally see how the educational part can create in the future much more of the innovation and interest from students to help people in the disability field. So it's kind of an additional piece of 412 ability tech that we're creating more awareness of disabilities, assistive technology in students from school to university. So it's kind of additional piece that we're working on. But otherwise, Mark explained in really clear way what we're trying to do. And thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. The education and awareness is such a huge part. So we really appreciate the aspect of this work. Gal, did you want to add anything?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. All right. Well, we're so glad to have you guys here. All right. Let me check out if anybody has their hand raised or if we have any questions in the chat. So we did hear that sort of your call. I wanted to revisit, Mark, your calls to action, just so everybody could understand exactly how to get involved. Obviously, you had mentioned that along with offering some events and resources, that you are looking for assistance from the community. I know that's some of what we touched on with what we do at Forbes Funds. So could you talk a little bit more about that and what would be useful? Who should be reaching out? Because I think, again, as we talked about earlier, this applies to so many people, so many groups, and if not our organization directly, the people we're serving. So I just wanted to give everyone another idea again of how, which touch points and how this is going to be relatable to them.
Yeah, sure. I think the if I were to boil down the kind of the crossroads that we're at right now is we've had a lot of great momentum. When we do have these in-person events, the engagement is through the roof. The vibes are very positive. There's a lot of energy in those events, and there's a lot of good things that come out of them with collaboration and some of the student type events that Alex has mentioned. But what we want to do is figure out how can we maintain that or sustain at least a portion of that energy and that collaboration between those events. And that's where, again, we want to take this online to facilitate knowledge sharing and collaboration more on a more regular basis. And so I don't know if any organizations have experienced.
Oops, I think your sound might have cut out, Mark. Apologies.
Hear me okay?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I don't know where I cut out, but I guess we're just looking for any advice on how to maintain the momentum and the dialogue among the community in between the in-person events. Online, we're thinking, and if anybody has any experience in kind of facilitating a dialogue or community building online, We'd love to hear that if they have any best practices or tools.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for the work that you're doing. This is incredible, and we're very excited to talk about partnering more as well with the Forbes Funds and GPNP. So as always, we will have, oh, we do have a question in the audience. Julie, would you like to come off?
Yeah, hi. I'm not coming on camera because I just got back from the gym and I'm not camera ready, but
No worries.
happy to-
No judgment zone.
Thank you so much. Regarding help with using technology for online engagement, let me introduce myself. I'm Julia Pepping. I'm the Director of Partnership Development for Carnegie Mellon University's Undergraduate Information Systems Program. And each spring, we we run a capstone course for the undergraduate students it's really kind of a consulting model where they will work with an organization. We like to work with mission-focused organizations, nonprofits, small businesses, to solve a problem using technology. So now this is a spring course, so the short term wanting to get something going may not be relevant, but I would love to talk to one or more of you about what we do and what the work that the students have done in the community, because I think they could probably bring some innovative ideas.
That would be fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
Great.
We
I'll
will-
reach out to you. I have your LinkedIn.
That would be great. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, if I could just mention too, hi, it's Tom from Variety Pittsburgh. Hi, everybody. Any chance, if there's anybody on here that hasn't been to one of the events, one of the get-togethers, I would just highly, highly recommend it. Like, just give it a shot. Like, you'll be like, what building am I going to where? And you will leave with energy and enthusiasm and business cards and momentum. This crew is awesome. So if anyone's out there thinking like, how good are these get-togethers? They're a wonderful professional development opportunity. Zach and Deanna, my colleagues, are on this as well. Molly's across the hallway from me. We love these events. So the team, Mark and the whole team, and Alex, they do an awesome, awesome job. So when in doubt, just show up. That's the advice to everyone listening today.
In the seats, right? That's what I agree. And I've heard a lot about it. I'm very much looking forward to the next event. We've heard great things about the energy, and again, it's the same purpose we have here, is just bringing everyone together to talk about what we have, what we need, share resources, and make this all just a little bit easier on each other. So we're so excited that everyone is here to connect. Thank you, Mark, for sharing out on what you guys have going on. I will drop the website again in the chat so that everyone can check out. And Mark, if you'd like to drop your contact information, you can do that as
sure.
well. Again,
Sure.
we'll have a recap in the newsletter that comes out on Friday, and this video will be available on the GPMP member portal and our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate
Thank
it. I
you.
am going to go ahead and pass it over to Emily for our GPMP public policy updates.
Thank you so much, Mark, and I appreciate the audience engagement this morning too. Hannah, not to put you too much on the spot, but I know a couple weeks ago when we were talking about our upcoming transformative leadership cohorts, we were kind of tight for time. And so I did, before going into my policy update this morning, want to give you a little bit of a chance to talk about TLC, and then maybe I can take it at 10:30. But just wanted to make sure we gave you the space. I think it was last week or the week before that was cut extremely short. And I appreciate Mark you using the very quick time you had this morning. And so Hannah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Christine. TLC is our transformative leadership and golf cohort. It was designed to teach current leaders and emerging leaders how to navigate complexity and also lead with humility and lead with vulnerability in a way that is reactive to all of the current things that we're managing as leaders. We use golf because the game of golf is actually a situation where you have to take into consideration all of the things that are happening around you before you make the right decision on where to put that ball. So golf and leadership go well together, as it's the same skills and the same muscles that you're exercising as you do both of them. So we're actually going to be having a happy hour event coming up at the end of May at First Tee. This is to get people excited about the cohort and to learn more about the cohort, but it's also just to invite you out to First Tee and introduce you to the Forbes Funds team and the Arnold Palmer course out at First Tee. And so we're going to be having information on that coming out really soon. But what I would say is you can go ahead and put the bit.ly link at the bottom here and put your name into our interest form. And then that way we'll make sure that anytime we have information about the upcoming cohort or the upcoming happy hour event, that you'll be on our contact list and can receive that. Okay. And then hopefully as we get closer to the launch of the cohort, I can hold a session on one of our Monday calls that goes deep into our curriculum and the things that we learn and who we learn with during the cohort time. Thanks, Emily. And any questions, you can send them directly to me in the chat or to Emily, and she'll get them to the right place.
I saw a glowing recommendation from Jordan Gilliam in the chat. Jordan participated, I think, 2 rounds ago, or maybe last round for the Transformative Leadership cohort. And I would echo everything that he shared this morning. I was not a golfer prior to TLC. And I don't know if it's like a gender thing or what, but like I was just never encouraged to play. And especially with fundraising season for the summit coming up, I had no idea back in 2023 when I had initially joined TLC how many opportunities come up for like funding and support and partnership just kind of like on a golf course and just like random conversations. So I think there's another element of the cohorts there where the intentional development of skills that would otherwise maybe not be developed, or options for engagement is really transformative, at least in addition to becoming a more transformative leader. I think the opportunity itself was transformative too. But with that, I will turn over to our public policy update. We have a couple of really exciting opportunities this week that have come together because of our wonderful ecosystem. So I'll jump into those first and then kind of open it up for questions in case there are any lead ups to our public policy committee meeting this Thursday that would be helpful to share or bring to our upcoming speaker. But I'm going to start sharing my screen. Christine, let me know if you can't see it. Are you able to see everything okay?
Almost.
Yes, no, maybe.
There we go. There it is.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so ecosystem update. So this Thursday, from 1 to 2:30 p.m., we will be focusing on the neighborhood assistance
Just a second.
program, neighborhood partnership program, and just kind of other funding opportunities that also facilitate partnerships across sectors. And
you
for
call
those
me later?
specifics, we're going to be, I hear a little bit of feedback. Alex. Oh, there we
Okay.
go. Thank you. So for this week, specifically, we're going to be hearing from DCED about the Neighborhood Partnership Program and Neighborhood Assistance Program opportunities, which are now open, I believe, until the end of May, which encourages partnership between a specific nonprofit and a specific for-profit entity for the sake of benefiting from a tax credit for the organizations. And I know just because of a lot of the stress that organizations are under right now, uncertainty with funding cycles, whether from philanthropic, government, or single dollar donation sources, is really top of mind for a lot of folks. And so I would absolutely encourage you to register for our Public Policy Committee meeting. It looks like we have the link pasted in the chat. Thank you so much, Christine, for being on it. But if there are any specific questions or kind of like lead up conversations that I can bring to our speakers in advance, that would be wonderful, because my goal is to have, we already have our speakers confirmed from the DCED. We are also very happy to be joined by the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank, which has been lucky enough to be able to take advantage of these tax credits in the past to share about their experience, not only signing up, or applying, I should say, to be an organization that can receive them, but also on the business side or the EZP side, what it's like for a for-profit institution that also benefits from the tax credits. I've got a couple of asks out to folks who participated in the program in the past to share about their experience as well, so you can kind of pick the right partner for that opportunity. So more to come on Thursday. And just as a quick reminder, I know we've talked about public policy committee meetings in the past, and Christine has been hearing feedback from a few members, and I just wanted to echo some of the things that she shared with folks. But these public policy meetings are open to anyone, and so we're kind of going through a little mini or micro rebrand, and just calling these public policy meetings. Anybody who benefits from our updates at the end of these community calls, like I'm going to give in just a second, that is just kind of a point in time recognition that not only are federal, state, and local policies relevant to the nonprofit sector, but they deeply impact the work that we're doing. On a day-to-day basis, this is a space for you. And so from 1 to 2:30 p.m. this week, for the first 45 minutes, we'll be really focused on neighborhood assistance program, the neighborhood partnership program, and updates from the DCED about other funding opportunities. But for the second 45 minutes of the meeting, Craig Mayer, who's on the call and one of our wonderful consultants that we work with on an ongoing basis, is drafting a impact of tariffs on the nonprofit sector in Southwest PA survey that we're going to be launching early next week. And also on Thursday, we'll be giving kind of a initial review of that survey to make sure that it's collecting the right information. And the public policy group who joins us is going to be instrumental into updating those questions and acting as kind of a first focus group to share that information with. And so again, if any of that sounds relevant to you, or if you're thinking, I really work closely with this organization that I know has been talking about that recently, or, it's an international nonprofit organization that has an office in Pittsburgh, and would really like to kind of build community around resources or conversations that are taking place across the sector, please feel free to share the invitation. There's a Zoom registration link that is the only registration required for the meeting, and I would just encourage you to attend. We also have a first call for our summit speakers application live as of last week, and the reason we're calling this first call is because this year's summit has two themes. One is AI advocacy and action, reshaping the social impact sector. The second is a kind of how we do this work matters theme, and that is through a series of informal and formal educational community building lead-up events with critical partners on topics like mentorship or, building your personal board of directors for your professional development, but also for the benefit of your organization, wellness, and really partnering not only within the nonprofit sector, but also across, local municipal governments, because everything is uncertain right now. It's not only the nonprofit sector, and we're really leaning into no one organization or no one sector being able to solve all of these challenges on its own. And so this first call for speakers is just tonight to help us get an idea of what types of topics are really well sourced in our community. Where do we have expertise that we can build out a summit track or a lead up event or something for our event in December? And you'll see if you click on the link that's in the chat, our final summit is December 4th through 6th as a culminating event this year, but we'll have a series of lead-up events throughout the year. And if you'd like to partner in any of those events or co-host or, be a part of our nonprofit holiday market that is coming up in December as well, please feel free to shoot me an email, but absolutely fill out that form. And we went a little bit out of order. Thank you for Hannah for going over the transformative leadership and Gulf cohort. So for today's public policy update, and based on a couple pieces of feedback that I've received in past weeks, one, we cover a lot on these calls, but two, making sure that the headlines and things that we're seeing that are either kind of distracting policy updates or something that is directly going to impact the nonprofit sector, or something that seems like it's going to impact the nonprofit sector, but maybe not for 3 to 6 months. One of the things that I've been receiving requests around is really tailoring these policy updates to be super clear on, what is the immediate impact, what are the things that we should keep an eye out for, and how can we get a little bit deeper into some of these issues on a week-to-week basis. So if there's any questions in the chat, Christine, please unmute and kind of flag it for me. But I'm going to go through these as in-depth as possible for our call this morning. One quick disclaimer, I am not a legal expert, but I do read a lot of these headlines and deeper articles around especially the executive orders and policies we're seeing at the federal level, but really leaning into the expertise of other ecosystem members for some of the immediacy of local impacts as well. So if you have a personal experience, or if this is something that you're looking into as well, please drop a comment or question or note in the chat, or feel free to unmute as well as we're going through this. So House of Representatives has passed House Resolution 1526. Many of you who are seeing or following headlines in the news might see this as the No Rogue Rulings Act of 2025. On paper, this legislation aims to limit federal district courts' authority to issue nationwide injunctions. This is something that we've seen in a lot of legal cases since January 20th with the first kind of wave of executive orders from the Trump administration. And so with federal district courts maintaining that ability, there's a lot of barriers that the Trump administration has faced in implementing some of those executive orders, between lawsuits and kind of a stay on a ruling. And so this No Rogue Rulings Act would restrict the injunctions to apply only to the parties involved in a specific case. So limiting kind of the geographic impact of, one of the district court's authority. And so this is under consideration in the Senate now. I've been looking for when the next session is going to be, or when this will be pulled out of the Judiciary Committee and introduced on the floor, and I haven't seen anything of date or of late on this, or any dates shared. But I do want to share this because while it's not, directly aimed at the nonprofit sector, this is something that would very much impact our work and also the work of those we serve, as so many of the executive orders impact day-to-day citizens and their abilities to, live with freedom and civic liberties. And so this injunction, or this bill would limit injunctive relief. So the federal district courts would be prohibited from issuing injunctions that extend beyond the immediate parties involved in a case. There is an exception for multi-state cases where two or more states from different circuits challenge an executive action, and then the case would be referred to a randomly selected 3-judge panel, which may issue broader injunctions considering the interest of justice and potential irreparable harm to non-parties. And so the bottom line here on the legal side is that experts are concerned that this limitation could hinder the judiciary's ability to provide timely relief against potentially unconstitutional federal actions affecting individuals and organizations not directly involved in litigation. And so we've seen executive orders that would pause funding to the nonprofit sector, or specifically target immigrants and refugees, many of whom live in areas like Southwest PA, where we had Pittsburgh as a resettlement city for years and years and years. And so looking at the services that we provide to individuals, limiting the legal recourse for multiple branches of government to be able to provide checks and balances is going to make it much easier for the types of executive orders that the National Council on Nonprofits, for example, has sued to pause the freeze on funding for nonprofit organizations. This would limit the ability for entities like that to be able to push back against some of these executive orders. And so specifically for nonprofits in Southwest PA, particularly those engaged in civil rights, immigration, healthcare, environmental advocacy, and a whole host of other issues, right? DEI is not listed in this, but it's something that is a foundational piece for all those pieces, or all those categories. There would likely be increased litigation burden. So organizations that are looking to push back against some of these orders may need to initiate separate legal actions to address federal policies affecting their constituencies, leading to increased legal expenses and resource allocation. So by separating this out and preventing this, the extending beyond immediate parties piece would create a huge burden on multiple parties to be able to push back against these. And it would also require increased coordination between those parties as those conversations are being had about constitutionality or, intent of these rulings. Second, delayed relief. So communities served by nonprofit organizations might face prolonged exposure to harmful policies due to the absence of immediate nationwide injunctions that would kind of freeze the policy at its intent or, initial proposal. And then finally, there are strategic challenges which would be faced. So again, the coordination to challenge federal actions would become complex, requiring multifaceted legal strategies across different jurisdictions. What we're seeing already now is that coordination is already difficult as organizations are focused on things like what language they can use. The National Science Foundation, when I think it was about a month ago, when they were publishing that list of kind of banned words for things that would be allocated resources for research or current grants, advocacy was on that list. And the ways that we define advocacy vary greatly within the nonprofit sector, and even specifically among GPNP members. Some organizations are speaking about advocacy as improving self-advocacy for those they serve. Others are talking about advocacy as a tool to use with lobbying, because as a 501c4 organization or as a 501c3 that is right up to their lobbying limit, the organization is extremely involved in connecting with policymakers, and there's a whole host of items between A and B there, and so coordination, as language is limited and things are changing between geographic jurisdictions, is extremely complex, and there's not often a legal expertise in the nonprofit sector within organizations. And so again, strategic challenges, that coordination is huge. So right now, House Resolution 1526 has passed the House, and so this depends currently on Senate approval and presidential assent. So looking at monitoring the legislative process, GPNP will continue sending out updates and information in our e-blast, our policy meeting, our public policy meeting on Thursday, and looking at if the bill's provisions do become law in the near future, what are some of kind of the scenario planning pieces we need to start considering now to adjust legal and advocacy strategies regionally through GPNP, but also, kind of just one-to-one for each organization. So the first thing, staying informed, tracking progress, like we just talked about, thinking about how these are going to impact your organization's operations. So doing kind of a reflection on, since January 20th to now, what are some of the executive orders that have been proposed, that have been blocked, that would have impacted your work. And so we're hearing a lot about tariffs, since that's an economic policy. And that has a huge impact currently, but there have been a lot of actions or proposed policies that haven't been able to be enacted, because of pauses like this and that checks and balances system, that we really need to kind of do a quick deep dive, per organization, and think through what are some of the things that would have impacted me, or that will impact me as, the stays or freezes, reach their 30, 60, or 90-day, limit, depending on the specific legal case. Second, consulting with legal counsel to understand potential implications of the bill on your organization's ability to seek judicial relief. We're looking at having webinars with a couple of legal experts from our partners at PANO, but also folks like PA Nonprofit Law, lawyers for nonprofits that are within our ecosystem, to kind of think about or have a kind of a working session about some of these issues. Advocacy engagement, engaging with policymakers to express concerns. Again, this doesn't have to be lobbying. I know this can seem scary, and I'll share a list of resources, in a couple of slides, but there's a huge amount of advocacy that is really critical at this point, just on the education side. I mean, we hear from every trip to Harrisburg, or every organization that speaks to an elected official or does their first legislative visit. It's crazy how much elected officials have on their plate now, and so they might not know the majority of the information you're sharing, even though it might seem obvious to you what the impacts of this bill would be. They might not see it that way, and so a lot of the rhetoric around this bill is that these courts are overstepping to limit, the president's power, when really it is, as the Constitution was written, a system of checks and balances to be able to put checks on power across branches. And so this bill would circumvent that checks and balances system. And so looking at advocacy to educate elected officials, and also help them with their talking points as they hear from their constituents, because a lot of engagement with constituents for policymakers is based on, how informed do I feel to be able to have this conversation against a person who's, calling my office. If you as a nonprofit leader or as a constituent are saying, 3 bullet points that are really easily digestible, and then they can take that to their next meeting next time they have a question about something, they're feeling more prepared and finding value in that relationship with you. And so advocacy and education go hand in hand. It doesn't have to be lobbying. You don't have to tell them which way to vote on the bill, but making sure that they understand the impact on organizations is critical. Collaborative action, partnering with organizations to share resources and strategies for addressing federal policies. Also making sure that we're understanding the impact of these things on our economy and communities locally. And then, and a good example of collaborative action would be something like our policy meeting this Thursday. Community education, informing stakeholders about potential changes in legal recourse and how it may influence your organization's advocacy and service delivery. I think I say this every week, but if your organization has not participated in advocacy to this point, now is the time to get involved, because these are really critical conversations that in a lot of cases, the success of bills like this comes from people not being informed in a certain amount of time about how to challenge it before it gets passed. And so making sure that we're sharing these updates before it is already impacting the nonprofit sector and we're having to, react versus respond or even prepare is really critical in the purpose of these conversations each Monday. And so looking at next topic is what we're seeing from a lot of the headlines around higher education and how this can be kind of a harbinger of things to come for other sectors. We've seen the mass layoffs and firings in the federal government. There are federal employees, in major cities and also not in major cities nationwide. Looking at the impacts on higher education, institutions of higher education exist nationwide. And so there's a lot of spotlight right now on this conversation with Harvard University. But really, depending on how this goes, there are far-reaching implications that could kind of continue this same issue at scale across other universities. And so looking at how this conversation is handled and what its impacts are going to give us some really good indicators of how similar conversations might unfold should that spotlight be turned on nonprofit organizations. So Trump administration has initiated a series of actions against Harvard University specifically, including freezing $2.2 billion in federal funding, which threatening its tax-exempt status as a 501c3 and demanding significant changes to its campus policies and governance. So this is a part of a broader campaign targeting higher education institutions perceived as promoting liberal ideologies with implications for academic freedom, institutional autonomy, and financial stability of universities nationwide. Also, outside of the institution of higher education, tactical implications, huge impacts for students as citizens and their ability to exercise free speech. The Trump administration's actions against Harvard University represent a significant challenge to the principles of academic freedom and institutional autonomy and free speech. And higher institutions of higher education in Southwest PA should likely proactively assess their policies, prepare for potential federal scrutiny, and engage in collective efforts to uphold foundational values of the academic community. So some of the legal implications and relevant policies at this level, or with Harvard specifically, the potential funding freeze. So $2.2 billion, Harvard University is continuing to push back against that. Not all universities have that ability. And so again, this is that kind of indicator of things to come for how one university kind of pushing back might give power to other universities. I've seen, other reports of a collective of universities kind of coming together and kind of standing strong with Harvard in this legal battle. Second, tax-exempt status threats. So Harvard is a 501c3, so it is a nonprofit, charitable organization. This is something that is really relevant specifically to our sector, as the majority of GPNP members certainly are 501c3 organizations. Third, demand for institutional changes. So this is that mechanism of control that is being pushed from federal government, or Trump administration, I should say, on to Harvard specifically, dismantling student organizations, reporting foreign students violating university policies, implementing measures to ensure viewpoint diversity, and raising concerns about government overreach into academic affairs. And then finally, legal challenges. So Harvard and other institutions are preparing legal responses, arguing that these federal actions violate constitutional protections, including the First Amendment and due process rights. So this is a really good example of, why would I, as a small 501c3 organization, pay attention to what's happening to Harvard? Harvard is a 501c3 organization. Statewide, there's similar conversations around UPMC and our university systems. And so looking at, tracking this conversation, the immediacy of impact, from this conversation and Harvard, probably not likely to directly impact your organization. However, looking at partnerships that you might have with CMU or, University of Pittsburgh, other organizations and universities, throughout Southwest PA that might not have the same, resources as Harvard to be able to combat some of these actions, it is really significant. And if you're working with those organizations already, definitely going to impact your work. And so recommendations for nonprofit leaders, specifically in Southwest PA: monitoring developments, so staying informed on the conversation; legal preparedness, consulting with legal experts to understand implications of federal directives, and developing strategies for compliance or challenge. This is something that only your board of directors can really weigh in on in terms of compliance or challenge. One thing that I have heard specifically recently is not preemptively complying to these things before we know what the long-standing impacts and implications are going to be. Advocacy and solidarity, so engaging in collective advocacy efforts with other institutions to defend academic freedom and institutional autonomy. We saw a lot of protests, marches, civic discourse and engagement recently. That's a really good place to, one, be very careful that you're not wearing your organization's logo on your t-shirt if you are going to participate in public advocacy. But two, a really good reason to join things like the GPNP Policy Committee, where we link to resources on how to advocate as an organization or as a 501c3 and also as a community member and constituent, because elected officials represent our interests. Fourth, support for international students, implementing support systems for international students who may be affected by visa policy changes, ensuring their well-being and continued participation in academic programs. We've seen things recently in the news about this for CMU recently, specifically from the federal level. And then public communication, articulating institutions' commitment to academic freedom, diversity of stakeholders, reinforcing the value of these principles in higher education. All of these things, again, recommendations, think about them within your organization, especially if you have a partnership with a university. If you're an organization that does not have a partnership with a university or college, the public communication piece might not make sense for you. It might not make sense for you even if you are in partnership with those organizations. Just talk to your partners and your board of directors and think through what might make the most sense at this juncture for you. SAVE Act. So this is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. This is a piece of legislation that proposes stricter voter registration requirements, likely, not potentially, affecting voter participation. And so this would mandate the documentation of in voter registration process, your personal ID matches your birth certificate or passport or other accepted document. And for things like mail-in ballots or online voting or automatic voter registration, it is going to really create pauses or gunking up those systems as things are being cross-referenced and matched. Also, if you are somebody who has, thank you for launching the survey, Christine. I appreciate you. Please fill out the survey on your screen because if this is a valuable call for you and you'd like to be an upcoming speaker, presenter, participate in these calls on an ongoing basis, we'd really value your input and feedback on some of the speakers, targets, and other topics that we participate in or share on these calls. Looking at the SAVE Act legislation, though, for anybody who has gotten married and their name no longer matches their birth certificate, there was a bill that was proposed that would allow a marriage license to be able to be one of those passable or accepted documentation pieces that was not passed. And so looking at who our constituents of our organizations are and the clients that we're serving, anybody who wants to participate and is eligible to participate in the voting process, a lot of nonprofit organizations are supportive or even polling places throughout our region. And so folks are going to start coming to you to ask questions, especially as established community leaders, about things like this. And so for the SAVE Act, or looking at how voting rights and data and resources that are contingent on those things, the recommendation for nonprofit leaders is staying informed on the new requirements and being prepared to talk about them with those you serve, policy monitoring, attending calls like this or the policy call on Thursday, and then also advocacy, educating and collaborating with other organizations to continue to push for accessible voting processes. Because the other piece here is that, even if somebody says like, well, why don't you just go get a passport, or why don't you just update your registration? That costs over $100. That's, there's a financial burden to updating some of this documentation that is just not realistic for a lot of folks. And so when we're thinking through, conversations around things like the SAVE Act, that has a disproportionate effect on resilient communities and vulnerable communities, that's just something that we have to be prepared to talk about as those in service to the community. So I mentioned resources for advocacy, National Council for Nonprofits, wealth of resources. And so from a recent webinar, that was kind of an update on their lawsuit against the Trump administration. They also shared a bunch of links and resources and advocacy scripts and a whole bunch of kind of fact sheets and kind of talking points that would be really good in any sort of conversation that you have with an elected official or anybody who does advocacy in your network. And I will continue to circulate those. We'll be sharing kind of a toolkit or repository from NCN, but also some of the updates that we've shared in the last couple of weeks on these Monday calls on Thursday's conversation. Thank you again to Craig for really making the first draft of that tariff survey. Odds are there are going to be other kind of point in time surveys that GPNP shares as we're continuing to respond to preempt having to react to a lot of the decisions. More resources for everyday advocacy, trends and policy issues, executive orders. Just check out the councilofnonprofits.org website because they have a ton of stuff. So I'll turn it over to Christine to close the call. On Thursday, we'll also be talking about some sort of regional series of implications for things like environmental policy, tariffs, how a lot of the Trump administration policies are already affecting Southwest PA economically and in terms of community development. But we're out of time to cover that this morning. So Christine, I'll turn it over to you to close the call. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you again, Mark and 412 Ability Tech for joining us today. Thank you, Emily, for our updates. And next week, we will have Beth Mellon from the Pittsburgh Foundation. She's going to talk to us about the IRS Form 990 and how you can use it as a tool for storytelling for your organization. So we're very excited to hear more about that. Everyone have a wonderful week. We will see you next week.